Right, Josh, thank you so much for joining me at Studio 360 for the RESi360 event. This is the refreshed Resi, but my understanding is this is your first time here. How are you finding it?
It is indeed, yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, the morning sessions were a bit doom and gloom, if we're honest, talking about where we're going and then branching off into things I hadn't really considered, metaverse and the like. So it's a good spectrum. I think everyone's here trying to understand where the market's going, which, crystal ball gazing is nobody's strong point, I think. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Fair enough. Well, I'm going to ask you a few forward-looking questions. We're going to try
my best.
look in the crystal ball a bit here. So, obviously, I know you guys are sector agnostic, but this event is focused on residential. How do you see the cost of living crisis impacting your underwriting for lending against residential projects?
So, I mean, that obviously affects the lender's exit, right? When you're looking, well, it affects value, which affects the lender's exit. So when you're looking at what the rent an occupier can afford to pay, given average salaries or depending on the segment of the market that the asset is targeting, whether it's upper bracket, middle, or more affordable. Based on some of the things we've heard today, the guys in the lower quartile are being absolutely hammered by energy costs and just general cost of living increases. When you're living on an annual salary that is less than half of the median income, we heard the nightmare story of people capping their own gas because they'd rather go with cold water and no heat in and they can't cook, but then have to pay those bills. So I think depending where you are in the sector, it'll obviously affect the underwrite. Equally, I was chatting to someone earlier who's a residential long-term lender, and they were saying in the upper quartile, you're seeing 10% year-on-year rental growth in those segments because people who are renting in your highly amenitized, well-located, sexy assets can stomach the increase. They might not like it, but they're actually okay. They can pay the increased costs. And because of the supply-demand imbalance at the moment, they don't want to run into the issue of having to now find a new apartment, the cost of moving, all that sort of thing. So they will stomach those increases. So from a lender's point of view, it really becomes, you have to get quite granular in terms of who the target market is, who the takeout, what NOI you're going to generate off that asset. And need to understand your growth assumptions moving forward. So if you're looking at a medium level product, I think it really will affect the underwrite. If you're looking at the top end of it, you can discount those rents by a certain amount and you're still going to be covering debt quite well in terms of income profiles and ICRs and things like that. And you would like to think that, it's not only the cost of living issue, it's also cost inflation for the operation of the building. That professional landlords will be able to, either through buying power or smart management, be able to manage their OPEX ratios accordingly or pass on some of that to the tenant, in which case they will just stomach it. But in a lower income bracket, that then will significantly affect your NOI coming off the asset and will affect your leverage because they just won't get the ICRs.
And we've talked, and you've gone into quite some detail there about the difference between upper quartile and lower quartile. Are you seeing a difference between different sort of residential asset classes and sectors? For example, is there, students as opposed to one level are protected a bit against inflation because they've got effectively government-backed income?
Correct.
So yeah, are you seeing a difference there? And I suppose single family, you've got more families who have broader considerations as opposed to your stereotypical millennial who might be living in a slightly more glitzy penthouse who doesn't have other mouths to feed.
Yes, I mean in terms of our appetite for that sort of thing, the student is considered to be counter-cyclical because fewer jobs or less attractive jobs, people go retrain, study, they need housing, that sort of thing. My personal experience, and this is purely anecdotal, so it's not gospel, is that the student product being put out there is actually quite high-end, it's quite expensive. You're looking at stuff that is not amazingly located, and it's still they're charging 600 quid a week for something, which is more than the rent I paid when I first moved into my first flat in London. Granted, it was a while ago. And those are astronomical rates for a student. And everyone is targeting the same group of foreign students coming from Southeast Asia or wherever they may be coming from, coming for the good education. So there are different market pressures or factors to be considered when looking at something like student versus senior living or BTR product. So your occupier universe in BTR is much wider,
Yeah.
but so is your competitive set. Whereas in the student world, it'll be about location and proximity to whether, if they've got a full NOMS agreement or not, proximity to multiple institutions of learning, or both to the university as well as to town centre, and what amenities are offered there, and parents and also institutions that are paying for education, like student housing, because it's more controllable and you know that you're around other students, the chances are you're going to study further and you can borrow everybody's study notes and things like that, and the externalities of being amongst other students outweigh the cost, the pound notes cost of it. Whereas for pure rental product, BTR, PRS, whichever way you view it, it's a much broader set, both from a supply and demand factor. So when getting quite granular, beds, whilst they will sound the same, they're not apples and apples. Similarly with senior living, depending if you have government leases or not, you have super high-end stuff like the projects going up in Chelsea and in Hampstead and other places, where it's similar to the upper quartile in BTR. People will stomach the increase in costs, and so the developer or the operator can effectively pass on the increased costs of operating. Whereas if it's a government-backed, senior living scheme that's for people who don't have much more than just the pension they've got from the hard-earned pension that they've got from 30, 40 years in a government job, it's a very different product. They can't afford to stomach major increases in cost of living. So looking to fund that, and the reputational risk that potentially goes with kicking out people's grandmothers onto the street as a lender when you enforce on something, probably makes it less attractive. So all these you get quite granular when looking at them now in this market, whereas 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, benign interest rate environment, good GDP growth, somewhat stable political situation relative to other jurisdictions at least, you could take views that you wouldn't take today without doing some serious homework in it.
And the big word that's pinning together both these questions, this last one, inflation, is the higher inflationary landscape and everything that comes with it, such as higher interest rates as central banks try and bring the inflation rate down. Is that making the lending landscape more competitive?
Yes and no. So a lot of more mainstream lenders, from my understanding, have turned the taps off because they can't get it's the gut reaction, the knee-jerk reaction that they tend to have every time there's a blip in something political or economic. So that then allows alternative lenders the opportunity to bank clients they wouldn't normally be able to access at lower leverage points than they'd normally have to put money out, but at the same price point, because if you're the only person in the market, that is the market price, right? I think where the competition is going to come in is for the top-tier clients with the top-tier assets, where they aren't asking for super aggressive leverage, where it's conservative leverage and your income profiles or potential future income profiles, depending on the nature of the deal, covers the debt significantly well, or sufficiently well. That's where the competition is going to come in, is banking the right clients and on the right deals. And I think that's where you'll see more aggressive terms coming from the suite of alternative lenders. In the less banked portions of the market, maybe not as well capitalized sponsors or secondary, tertiary locations, I think lenders will be price makers. So it's that balance of risk reward for lenders and how they view the world. Is this a 2-year problem? Is it a 5-year problem? If you look at all the curves we saw in the earlier presentations, and just keep looking at like the 30-year yield curve and 30-year yield curve and things like that, it should all be okay, right? And the question is how long is the interim pain, and how cautious does one need to be? So I think if you've got sufficient cash in a deal, a good sponsor, and a good asset, lenders will be queuing up to fund them.
Well, Joshua, thank you so much.
Thank you.